Hey, welcome to Film Fanatics, three film geeks discussing movies both new and old. My name is Dan.
My name is Justin.
And I'm Joseph.
This week we have a different show than one that we've ever done. With no big releases this week, we decided to take a look back at some of the 2014 movies we watched and enjoyed on DVD that we have not brought up on the show before. Each one was specifically picked by one of us and brought to the group for this show. And then we'll continue our series looking back at the first half of the decade, and that continues with our top 5 horror films from 2010 on. And in our triple feature of older films, it's new classic This Is 40, my pick for old classic The Ref, and our Oscar A to Z movie 2010's Another Year. First, though, we have to talk about this Sony/Spiderman thing. There's a couple things with Sony lately. Joe brought to my attention what's going on with Spider-Man, so he can shed some more light on that. And, of course, the Sony hack that happened a few weeks ago, which may or may not involve some terroristic acts in an effort to have them not release The Interview, which is coming out on Christmas Day. Joe, let's talk about Spider-Man for a second. What's going on with that?
Honestly, even by the article I read, it's like no one's really sure what's going on over there. Apparently, Sony's working on a deal with Marvel now, with Walt Disney Studios. They're talking, apparently, about how they're going to negotiate. Now, they're not entirely sure whether Sony's going to give up the rights or not. They might have some Marvel involvement, but they might be possibly selling the rights to the character so that they can have him in with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, or they might just retain the rights to the character with more involvement. But either way, that might involve recasting and rebooting Spider-Man again, which nobody wants. So,
yeah, I can't imagine.
But they're not really entirely sure what the direction to take their current storyline. So it feels like it's a complete mess. There's like about 5 different movies possibly in the works, and it feels like a no-win scenario. They don't want to give up the rights to Spider-Man, obviously, but the last film didn't do as well as they wanted. Mm-hmm. But why would you give it Spider-Man? Because people still see it. So it's really difficult. Sony's in a really tough spot now with the Spider-Man franchise.
So, in the comic books, does Spider-Man team up with the Avengers?
He's not exactly a main member, but he has joined.
Okay. And then also, with the Sinister Six, where does it leave that?
Well, that's the big problem, is that what they're going for, it's been a little bit... we had mixed feelings about the next movie. They're trying to cram so much plot into so few movies. I mean, I think if they led with the Sinister Six movie in the next one, it would be too big too soon. I think you need at least one more movie between that to build things up. I think they're moving too fast. But the idea of a Sinister Six movie for me is awesome. I mean, that's the ultimate, like one of the ultimate Spider-Man storylines is 6 great villains team up. It's something we would never really have seen before in any comic book movie. So potentially we want to see it. So if they cut that project off and reboot it again, everyone's going to be frustrated. Literally,
right.
People might not see the new rebooted movie because we just rebooted again. Right. And people were mad about that as it was. So they can't reboot it. They're not going to have a choice. But Garfield says he's worried. He doesn't know if he was going to be on for a 4th movie, another 3rd movie. It's iffy.
Right.
So it feels like
no one knows what to do.
Worst case scenario, we might not have Spider-Man for a while. But then again, we're going to have to because somebody wants to make the money.
Right.
But even if Marvel gets it, it's going to be a bit of a struggle because people are starting to like Garfield now. So I don't know.
Well, Justin, on the show here, you're the sort of Garfield detractor in this role. I mean, what are your thoughts on making yet another Spider-Man reboot?
Well, I mean, the biggest problem with the reboot has just been the fact that it's completely unnecessary. It was done entirely to retain rights to the franchise, and it felt tacked on. It bothered a fair proportion, which is why I think the sequel did not do nearly as well. I go back and forth as to whether or not it's actually Garfield's fault or just the fact that they haven't had good writers. I've continued to argue that Mark Webb was not the man for the job, and he's done nothing to disprove that theory as far as I'm concerned. But I think the big question right now is just, would it actually work? And if so, would we just jump right into the action, or will we go straight up origin story again? Because I think if it's just established hero, it could probably work. Because at this point, everybody knows the gist of Spider-Man.
Yeah, they can't do another origin.
Well, that's kind of one of the problems. It's a good point, though, Justin. That's what I want to see more from superhero movies. To keep things fresh, stop rebooting. I know everybody loves the origin stories, they're the best, but literally if you're starting to reboot origin stories for characters we already know, I mean, one reason you could argue that Michael Keaton's Batman was so successful wasn't really an origin story. They just jump right in. People know the character. He's established. You know who he is, you know what he's about. Let's get into the actual story and not be held back by an origin movie to lead into another story.
They still touch on it a little bit, though.
That's true, but it's like Batman Begins. I mean, I like Batman Begins a lot, but a lot of people prefer Dark Knight because no origin story. Mm-hmm. We know Batman.
Get into
Let's
it
go.
already.
It's a whole separate story.
Yeah.
If they're gonna reboot Spider-Man, I agree with Justin. We don't need an origin story. Let's get in the thick of it. Start off fighting supervillains. Get with the story. We know your backstory. You know your motivations. Let's see a different Spider-Man. Let's see you grow up a little bit.
Okay.
Spider-Man, not Spider-Boy. Again,
Right.
You know?
That's true. All right, and then the other thing with Sony has been this leak and hack that has just been a total disaster, both a PR nightmare with all these leaked emails with higher ups making questionable remarks, let's say, about people like Angelina Jolie and Adam Sandler and some of their big money makers, Kevin Hart. But part of the issue is that people are involving it with this movie, The Interview, coming out with Seth Rogen and James Franco, saying that maybe it was a North Korean group that sort of hacked into this thing. To me, I mean, obviously, Sony's not going to pull the plug on the movie. They're definitely releasing it. I feel like that's maybe the best thing Sony can take from this is it's a ton of free promotion for The Interview, and what brings more people out to a movie than a little controversy?
True that.
So what do you guys think?
That's an interesting spin on it. I know that some people are concerned that if Sony released it without showing any real precautions for people, it might be bad PR for them as a company. So, I don't know. I actually think that's a good way to say it. I think people are going to see it no matter what. I just think some people are a little paranoid about movies these days as being sites for terrorist attacks, Dark Knight Rises shooting.
Right.
And I mean, I don't know. I think personally it's probably just blowing smoke, but you never know.
You never do, and I definitely am with you on this one, Joe. I feel like at this point it would be just be ridiculous not to get it out there at this point. It's controversial. There will be detractors, obviously, but there's still going to be a relatively big fan base waiting to see how this is going to turn out. They might as well just roll the dice and see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, the last two movies from this team, which was This Is the End and Neighbors, both grossed over $100 million. So it seems like an odd Christmas release, but,
Well, to be fair, it wasn't originally supposed to be.
That's true, right. It was supposed to come out in October. And, I mean, controversy of this nature has been surrounding this movie for months, with Kim Jong-un himself, calling the movie an active war and all of this. So
It's certainly something.
Yeah, so we'll see how that plays in once the film gets released. We start off with a movie that was briefly mentioned on the show not too long ago when we did our Best of Summer show with our special guest Peter. He had mentioned the film Only Lovers Left Alive, and Justin brought it to the group for this show. So, Justin, let's hear about Only Lovers Left Alive.
Absolutely. Growing tired and weary of this world and humans, whom he refers to as zombies, vampire musician Adam, played by Tom Hiddleston, contacts his lover Eve, no subtext there, played by Tilda Swinton, to meet him in Detroit. Over the course of several nights, the two struggle with their lifestyle in a decaying world, putting up with Adam's frustrating sister, played by Mia Wasikowska, and the only other vampire ally they know, Christopher Marlowe, played by John Hurt. I'm far from an expert on the films of Jim Jarmusch, but those that I've seen all but beg for discussion and repeat viewings. While I certainly can't call myself a fan, I never find myself at a loss for words in regards to any of his movies. Only Lovers Left Alive, the third film I've seen in Jarmusch's repertoire, is easily the best of the bunch, merging great characters with a more than compelling, if somewhat on-the-nose narrative, with commentary on the modern world. Similar to his more mainstream character Loki, Hiddleston completely transforms into his character, and while he's clearly depressed, he never drags down the story. Jarmusch's own sharp use of cinematography only makes this component even better, using lighting to truly bring out how drained his protagonists have ultimately become as the centuries have gone on. Unfortunately, as seemingly always is for me, the introduction of Wasikowska's character pulls the film down, heading into a few predictable moments that ruin the already grounded and intelligent concept. However, once she's back out of the picture, the film goes back to its original nature and is all the better for it. Only Lovers Left Alive is easily one of the more underrated films released this year that I hope shows up again in my year-end top 20, and I give it an A-.
Joe, what did you think of Only Lovers?
I actually kind of felt that this was sort of an interesting fusion of like Anne Rice literature with True Blood-esque type storytelling. I thought that it kind of focuses along a more grounded, realistic portrayal of the vampire kind of suffering and trying to make a living and survive without giving into those basic desires and needs to murder people. And I think that really you've got some great people here. I mean, Hiddleston and Swinton, I mean, they got good chemistry. And they're both good performers, and they really delve deeply into the characters, as Justin pointed out. I think Hiddleston, in particular, does a good job here. I mean, really, you just sense his true despair, and I think it really is one of the key parts of the film that really keeps it going. The narrative itself is interesting, but I do feel like it does drag a little bit at points. I think some of the editing choices, like the constant slow motion, kind of, maybe it's meant to emphasize the depression, but I thought it kind of created some minor pacing issues early on. I do agree that the sister character kind of brings the story down a bit, but I guess they put her in there to mix it up, and it does kind of find its place again towards the end. On the whole, I thought that they utilized lighting and music really well to emphasize the emotions of the characters, but it felt like the film was kind of dragged down a little bit by some of those editing choices. However, overall, I think it was a relatively successful experiment. I give it a little lower than you, Justin, a B+.
Well, Jim Jarmusch is one of the real artsy directors that I actually like, mostly because his stories are still about people and what they go through. His movies seem to focus less on the what kind of cool shots can I do and tell the actual story. Dead Man, that Justin brought to Old Classic a few months ago, wasn't my favorite, but I liked the story behind it and the characters. The segments of Coffee and Cigarettes and Night on Earth that I've seen are interesting because of what they're trying to say. In Only Lovers Left Alive, Jarmusch puts a new twist on the tired vampire genre. I have not seen True Blood, Joe, but I sort of thought of Angel, from the Buffy series and from Angel. There's decent performances here, like you guys mentioned, most notably from Tom Hiddleston. I like that Jarmusch made his vampires so interested in pop culture. I thought that was kind of fun. I love that he placed them in Detroit. That was perfect. I wish it went a little further in exploring the two main characters, and of course, Wasikowska fails to ever make anything better. But I do think this is one to check out, and I give it a B+ as well. So, what was the third movie that you've seen of Jarmusch's collection?
Ghost Dog, Way of the Samurai.
My favorite.
Okay, so you've seen that one too.
Oh, yeah, I like that one a lot.
Okay, just based on title, that sounds like a Joe kind of movie.
Well, you got
a little bit
Samurai versus the Mafia.
Okay. Wow.
He's already on board.
Part and parcel. Yeah.
Right, and Forrest Whitaker too.
Holy cow.
You know.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Justin, I would urge you to check out some of those earlier films of his.
Oh, definitely.
Where it is kind of a lot of... I mean, Coffee and Cigarettes, I guess, isn't that old, but Night on Earth is from 91, maybe. Both films are pretty much just segments of people talking and having conversations, and that's sort of what the movies are about.
Sounds very Justin.
Yes, I
don't know what you mean.
I think he would like them
on.
very much. So, like I said, I haven't seen either movie in full, but I've seen enough, pieces of each to sort of know. But no, I liked this one. What was it, Justin, that struck you about this that you wanted to bring it to the show?
I just thought it was a really well-crafted original story. I thought the acting was really good. I thought even though it's not the most action-packed, quote-unquote, vampire story, it still gives you that sort of drained energy that I love about it. I felt like this was one of those that I think we just had to discuss, given... obviously Peter bringing it up, and even my own personal takes on it.
Are you guys like me, kind of sick of the whole vampire thing? Because vampires and zombies, I'm kind of both done with, but I like what he did here with them.
I mean, I'm kind of tired of how popular they become over the past 5 years or so, but with Twilight dying down now, I think it provides good opportunities for more original takes on vampires, which we've seen before. So, I don't know, maybe draw back a little bit, but you can always have a good vampire movie, I think, and zombies for that matter.
I wouldn't call myself necessarily tired. I think it's just a matter of when mainstream is going so deep into exploring one particular genre, the stories themselves get incredibly weaker. And I feel like obviously the Twilight craze died down. Jarmusch pulled this out and really swung for the fences.
Is this based on anything?
I don't believe so. There is a book called Only Lovers Left Alive, but it isn't.
Not related.
Yeah, it's unrelated.
So this is an original story.
It is.
Which in the vampire game is pretty hard to pull off, actually.
These days, yeah.
Yeah. I did like Tilda Swinton as well.
Well, she's always pretty good.
Yeah. She's had a couple of, between this and Snowpiercer, she's had a couple of really, good oddball performances this year. All right, well, up next is Witching and Bitching, and that's one that Joe brought to the table. Joe?
Yes. Wow, it's so rare you can actually curse and get away with it.
That's right.
No. Witching and Bitching, or The Witches of Zugarramurdi, is a 2013 Spanish comedy horror film co-written and directed by, actually we'll just say written and directed by Alex de Iglesia. It stars Hugo Silva, Mario Casas, and Carmen Mora. Two unemployed men, played by Casas and Silva, commit a robbery and are forced to run from the police and one of their ex-wives. While on the run, they venture into an impenetrable forest inhabited by a group of cannibalistic Basque witches in the Navarrese town of Zugarramurdi. This film is actually one of a handful that have utilized witches well as threatening villains, and more specifically, a type of mythology mostly unknown to American audiences. The movie is ridiculous farce right from the first scene, but actually has some fun characters, interesting commentary on male and female relations, and some pretty cool imagery, barring some bad CGI towards the end. There are even a few scares, but it's more gross-out makeup than anything. I actually do think the story does meander a bit, and the ending kind of loses me in the mythology, but overall it's a wacky and mostly enjoyable homage to horror movies, and I give it a B.
Just from the title of this, I wasn't quite sure how it was going to go. But right from the start, it sort of lays its cards on the table and lets the audience know to brace themselves for some silliness. When it totally shifts gears from a heist movie to what it eventually becomes about, it is a little jarring and unexpected. But what's nice is that it keeps up that same silly tone and the pacing, regardless of what story it's currently telling. I do agree, Joe, the sacrifice scene towards the end goes a little too far off the deep end. Mm-hmm. But I think it does end up connecting everything pretty well. It's definitely not highbrow.
No.
But it is a lot of fun, and I also give it a B. Justin?
Horror comedy is a difficult genre to pull off in that it's seldom explored, and only a few directors, notably Edgar Wright and Sam Raimi, really do it justice. While I'm not entirely sure Witching and Bitching is the next great addition to the genre, it definitely makes for a fun watch. Admittedly, it does take a bit to actually get going. Despite the hilariously wacky, if not semi-noticeable low-budget opening heist, the payoff is definitely in the latter half, where the film goes completely and utterly for broke. Much like Raimi's Evil Dead series, it's definitely not for the squeamish, but the increased chaos definitely lends itself to a number of funny scenarios and witty, albeit slightly repetitive banter. Overall, Witching and Bitching is an entertaining experience for the right crowd, despite said flaws, and I give it a B.
B's all around.
Yeah.
Indeed.
I liked the heist story a lot.
Yeah, actually. That was pretty awesome.
When you brought it to us, we'd sort of come up with the top 5 concept of horror movies based upon Only Lovers and Witching and Bitching. So when it started and it was this heist movie, I was like...
Confused?
I was like, where is this going? And then when it shifts gears. But I thought it was probably funnier as a heist movie with a better story with the witches, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that the fact that they're on the run and just kind of having to deal with that is probably where some of the best comedy is. But I think the story with the witches is actually pretty good.
Yeah, I would say... the heist part is pretty... obvious. Generic, yeah.
It's just the way they do it's what's funny.
Right.
I mean, my favorite storyline, and I don't want to give anything away, there's that one character that they kind of hijack the cab and he's there. He just wants to get to his job interview. There's a running gag with him. And that always made me die laughing because I was like, I just hope that guy makes it, And so many bad things happen to him, the poor guy.
Yeah.
But I thought it was pretty good. I liked the performers. I thought it was one of the more original horror movies I've seen in a while, and it was pretty entertaining. I didn't think the opening was that low budget. I mean, maybe, I guess in terms of big Hollywood, I thought it looked pretty good.
It was a pretty decent car chase for what it was.
Oh no, it was good for what it was. It was just still fairly noticeably low budget, but kind of like Robert Rodriguez, I can't believe you're pulling this off on such a minimal budget kind of way.
Fair enough, I guess.
I didn't think it was like...
I didn't think it was too noticeably low budget, but I don't know. So you didn't like the opening as much, Justin? I thought that would grab your attention right away. That's how it did for me.
There's that, and then there's this kind of like long interval where
they got to get to the forest.
Yeah, where it's like, okay, we're sort of on the slow track to the actual storyline, which I kind of want the same kind of like fluid comedy that was present in the opening scene. That's just sort of like, okay, got to take that road, and then we get back to it like 20 minutes later.
Okay,
it's not bad. It's just.
Don't let that break.
Yeah.
Well, I'll be honest. It sort of reminded me, and Joe, I think you'll appreciate this most because you're going through the old seasons, but it reminded me of The Simpsons, how they kind of, towards like the 9th, 10th seasons, started to switch gears, and every episode was like, the first act was something, that had nothing to do with the rest of the story.
And then the rest of the story.
And then the rest of the main story and how they connect it. It sort of reminded me of that a little bit.
That's a very good comparison for formula, actually. It's kind of one reason why I think that the early Simpsons episodes are stronger, because they had whole episods that everything really was connected, and it kind of leads into more Family Guy-esque territory.
Right.
But that is a good point. You have your hook, and then you lead into the actual story.
Right. Up next is my pick, and that is I Am Divine.
It's about the Irish guys, right?
Yeah, but before we go into this...
Tell them my failure. This is pretty great.
I'll just point out that there was a miscommunication, and Joe thought we were watching the 90s British comedy Waking Ned Divine, which,
that's what I heard,
is a great movie. I saw it, in theaters long ago, and I was before I was grading, but I'd probably give it like an A-. It's a good movie.
It's pretty good, yeah.
But so unfortunately, Joe can't talk about I Am Divine, but...
I will watch it for the wrap-up for the year.
Yes, that would be awesome. But Waking Ned Divine, good movie as well.
Check it out.
Long before RuPaul taught us how to work it, there was the original celebrity drag queen, Divine. And this documentary takes us through his life, from birth as Harris Glenn Milstead, through his entire career as Divine, and early death, all through clips of movies and entertainment shows and loads of interviews with the people that knew him, most notably director John Waters, who basically made a star of the Divine persona. It's a fascinating story, I think, both for people who were fans of Divine's movies like Hairspray and Pink Flamingos, but also for people who maybe didn't even know anything about the character. Certainly for any supporter of gay rights, as Divine really was one of the people who broke down barriers in the entertainment industry, and it's interesting to see how that all happened. It's well put together and includes great interview clips from the people who were there, and a lot of clips actually about Divine's mother. My one issue with it is that I've always found John Waters a remarkably fascinating character and person, and for about 20 minutes towards the middle, it's almost as much of a Waters doc than it is about Divine, and I kind of wanted to see his story continue. It's hard to do a movie about Divine and her career without a sizable chunk on Waters as well, since they dovetailed for a long time, so I'm not sure if there's a solution there, but it definitely left me wanting more about Waters, and that may be bad for a documentary about somebody else. I give I Am Divine an A-. Justin, what'd you think?
Regardless of personal opinions about the movies, John Waters' filmography is truly in a league all its own, and that's largely because of the actors willing to embrace his craziness. Most notably, the subject of this documentary, Divine. That said, while Divine has a story worthy of Waters' downright bizarre antics, the documentary takes a look at the actor's life with a sense of respect and admiration, as both performer and a human being. The end result is quirky fun with a sort of sense of tragedy lingering over the conclusion. However, where the film falters slightly is in the negatives, and much like you, Dan, the balance. Admittedly, it's a hard thing to do because the two are close to synonymous with each other, but it is what it is. The majority of the interviews talk about all the positives of Divine, but the challenges and setbacks are scant at best, leaving some of the issues like addictions kind of minimal. That said, I'm Divine was a welcome addition to the documentaries I've seen this year, and despite this flaw, much like Dan, I also give this one an A-.
You're right, Justin. I mean, it certainly isn't a warts and all documentary, but I would say towards the end, as it goes more into his death, they certainly talk about his addictions, health problems, and personal problems. But I suppose you're right. They could have maybe gone into it a little bit more. I do think, though, they were really trying to focus on the career more than the person. I mean, because we don't know that much about Glenn as a person. Almost the whole movie is about Divine, the character,
right,
more than it is about Glenn. So I don't know if that's why they chose to do it that way.
Do you think showing all those different aspects would have made it a stronger documentary? Because
I think one of the big things, probably to help combat the whole Waters-Divine imbalance that the documentary has, I think it would be more efficient if they actually focused on the whole conflict between Divine and Glenn. Where does one end and the other begin, and vice versa?
Well, I mean, I think the documentary makes it clear there was no
major distinction.
There was, yeah.
On the end of it.
Yeah, I mean, he became Divine very young and sort of dovetailed the two nicely. So I don't think there really was any inner conflict as far as that's concerned.
But I mean, they also sort of flirt with that a little bit near the end, where there's sort of this sense of, not to give anything away, regret.
Yeah, I suppose a little bit. It was really cool that they had that really, like, right before his death interview, because they went back to that clip a few times. I don't know, what it was some sort of, like, cable access show or something.
Right.
And he was able to, as Glenn, sort of talk more for himself. So I can see what you're saying about that. Did you know much about Divine going into this at all?
Outside of just a couple stray facts, obviously Hairspray, obviously Pink Flamingos.
Yeah.
Most of it was completely and utterly new to me.
Okay. I mean, yeah, some of it was new to me. Some of it I knew. I'm a huge John Waters fan. You know, no surprise with the whole Hairspray thing. But, Joe, are you familiar at all with John Waters, even?
Not really.
Okay.
I know about Pink Flamingos.
Right.
I'll be honest,
right.
I didn't know that he did Hairspray as well.
He did the original Hairspray and then was sort of the one that turned it into a Broadway show.
Yeah, I really am not familiar with Divine at all, honestly.
Okay. Yeah, Divine is an interesting character, and I think you'll enjoy the movie.
All right. Would you say that it's interesting for people that don't know anything about him? Is it informative in that sense? Or is
actually do.
Or is it more for the fans?
Definitely.
Well, it's definitely...
Or is it more of a balance?
Well, I mean, I think Justin and I are a pretty good balance, because he really... I mean, this is not really in his wheelhouse as it is in mine, and... I think, you know, we both got a pretty good enjoyment and a pretty good appreciation.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Of the character and the person. But Waking Dead Divine, also a good film.
Yes, it is.
All right.
B+.
And Justin, our last one we'll go back to you with, and that is The Rocket.
Taitok, played by Boonsri Yindi, 1,000 pardons if I have the phonetics wrong, is a young boy living in Laos who, because of being the only surviving twin in his family, is believed to bring bad luck to those closest to him and everyone around him. Fiercely determined to prove that theory wrong, Taitok explores war-torn areas in an attempt to build his entry in the exciting and very dangerous rocket competition. About 4 months ago, I received a text from my father strongly encouraging me to come to the local college where he works at, where director Kim Mordaunt was showing this film. Sadly, I responded too late and missed out, but needless to say, I wish I had, because The Rocket is such a simple yet rich piece of filmmaking that I wish more films were like in contemporary cinema. Mordaunt uses his documentary background to bring the culture to life, devoting ample time to make each character contribute something to the actual story. This is paired with absolutely gorgeous cinematography, not only of the landscape, but of the imagery in the climactic competition. Although it does slow down only slightly in the middle, The Rocket comes back full steam for the finale that makes the whole film all the more worth watching, and I give it an A.
Joe, what do you think of The Rocket?
I think that the main character of the movie is actually the nation itself, it seems. I mean, I like the way that the director just utilizes the cinematography, like Justin said, to really just demonstrate how beautiful the land is. And we really get to immerse ourselves in just the different backlash of the government forcing these people off their homes, and how it obviously affected people in a very realistic way, I imagine. And we get to learn more about the culture and the superstitions, but at the same time, it still remains very grounded, a very personal story, a very believable story. It's kind of really focusing on something that is really hard to discern, because really it's a basic life experience. Sometimes all these bad things happen, and there's no real explanation for it. And when somebody comes up with a concept like a curse, it seems hard to fight it. But this is basically about this boy's attempt to really struggle against it. And it's really quite powerful. I think the performances were really good. I feel like there's a lot of subtext in this movie that definitely would give it another watch. I kind of felt like I was waiting for the actual rocket plot to show up for a while, which kind of bugged me a little bit. I felt like once it did get to that point, it really did kind of capstone everything that preceded it. And I'm not saying we didn't need a lot of what occurred, but I do agree, Justin, it slowed down a bit, and I felt that it kind of bordered on getting repetitive at the points there. Overall, though, I did feel like it was a really enriching experience, and I did really like the conclusion of the movie, but I would leave it with an A-.
This movie definitely brings the audience into a world that we rarely see on screen. It is a bit reminiscent of Beasts of the Southern Wild, which I think is a better film than this, but the atmosphere here is beautiful, and it is an interesting story of redemption and proving oneself, and the young actor in the lead role just does an incredible job here. But I think it takes a while to get to the meat of the story, Joe. I think you were sort of touching on this. Everything up to that point is nice, But it isn't really until we get to the climax of the competition that the movie finally made me feel something. So for me, it's a B+, just one tick lower. I mean, I thought the idea of the curse was cool. Mm-hmm. You know, we get that right from the beginning, and it's gone back to a lot.
I was sold on it,
and I was sold on it there. But then for 40 minutes or so, it was just like, where is this going? Where is this leading? And then we get to the rocket stuff.
Well, I think Joe actually hit the nail on the head. There's a lot of subtext here, and I like the fact that it's not sugarcoating the world that this takes place in. It's tackling a lot of bigger issues in a really mature and very grounded way. And I honestly like that. I don't fault you for not liking it, but I do respect it for taking that route and exploring it in a tasteful and really well shot, really well written way.
I don't disagree with any of that, but I feel like we've been there, done that with Beasts just a year and a half ago with a lot of these same themes.
I was actually thinking about Beasts when I was watching it.
I feel like they're two very different movies. I mean, they're both handling sort of...
I don't know. I think the same general concept is the same. You know, kind of a embedded culture.
I don't know. Cajun culture versus Lao.
Well, I mean, they're kind of
apples and oranges, but
I mean, they're
but people getting pushed out of their land,
very tribal, very close
child,
off.
Sort of being at the center of it all.
Fantastical element behind it.
I don't know.
There's some parallels.
Fantastical, little bit, but
not about as much as in Beasts.
Not to the full extent of Beasts, but
But I agree with Dan. I felt like there were some parallels. I don't know if it was intentional or not. But
I could see this being straight up coincidence.
I believe it was in production for a while. One thing that was interesting for me, I don't know how you guys feel about this, but I thought the main character did a really good job. And like I said, I was really kind of sold on the curse after a while. Like I believed it was a real thing. Whether it was, within the context of the movie, I think it pretty much was.
Well, and certainly he believed it,
and he did believe it. Mm-hmm. And he goes through so much, and I really kept trying to think to myself, he's such a kid. There's only so much you can take, so much struggle, so much sadness that such a young person could take. But sometimes I did feel like he was actually getting into trouble, like purposely. Like there were some decisions he made that, despite everything, he seemed like he was a very intelligent young man. Mm-hmm. So not everything that he did I felt was a result of a curse, but a result of his own actions. And sometimes I felt like that made it a little difficult to like him. I don't know. It was hard for me to read him.
I think it's partially, a nature versus nurture kind of scenario. I mean, if you're told that you're cursed, then maybe you do lash out, because why not? I'm cursed.
Yeah.
That's all they're willing to accept of you.
Yeah, so I don't know. I didn't think he was... Do you think he was kind of like a jerk a little bit sometimes?
I understand that, but I did feel like the way he was portrayed, like, I don't want to spoil anything, but there's something that happens to somebody close to him, and he seems to have no real reaction, and maybe that's just his way of dealing with it, but I was like, I don't know. I felt like there should have been a little more grieving, perhaps. Maybe a little more obvious. I don't know. I could have used a little bit of that, and that was one thing that bugged me in the back of my mind, like, does he really care? I know he does. I know he does in his own way, but I'm not sure if he quite sold it as much, and maybe that's something the writer was trying to portray. Maybe shock. I don't know, but I thought that was a little difficult to swallow. But once again, towards the end, it does set itself right. Mm-hmm. But that was one issue I had.
All right, let's go next to our top 5, and this week we are tackling the horror genre, looking back at the last 5 years, as the decade is about half over, and I'll start first with a couple honorable mentions here, and that is Sinister, which is a movie that I love. Hopefully it'll show up on somebody's list here. And You're Next is the other one, which is not top 5 worthy, but it really was surprising how much I liked this movie. And even on a second watch, where the mystery sort of reveals itself, because you know it already, it was still a good watch. It was funny, and I thought a pretty clever movie. My number 5 is Dark Skies. This is a movie that really did horrible at the box office. It starred Kerry Russell as this mom, and her son has some issues. There are birds crashing into the window, and that was probably the most memorable part of the trailer. But J.K. Simmons, another great performance from him. He sort of plays the guru that they go to help with their problems. My number 4 is Cabin in the Woods. This is another of the horror comedy hybrids, in the vein of some of the directors Justin was mentioning earlier. And we've talked about this a few times on the show. Some more of my favorite people, Bradley Whitford and Richard Jenkins.
Of course.
Yeah, of course. leading the comedy there. My number 3 is Paranormal Activity 3. This is by far my favorite of the Paranormal Activity films, and the only movie on this list that is a found footage film, sort of certainly a tired genre by the start of the decade already. But I thought they came up with some pretty inventive ways to keep the scares going in Paranormal 3. And my number 2 is The Conjuring. Love this movie. We've talked about it many times on the show. I wish the Annabelle movie that spun off of it was better. Hopefully The Conjuring 2, which will be coming out, I believe, in 2015, right?
I think so.
Yeah. Hopefully that will sort of course correct Annabelle and bring it back to true scares. And just a great throwback to classic horror films. Joe?
My number 5 is actually John Dies at the End. I mean, talk about a really bizarre film. I mean, it ranges anywhere.
It's bonkers.
Ranging anywhere from really dark comedy to just genuinely scary stuff. But really, really unique film. And I think for that alone, it's just a stretch on there. Though it's the least horror on the list, so that's why it's so low. But it's definitely a watch. Number 4 is The Conjuring. I mean, this is a great throwback to classic horror, and I think it works really well. I think that we should get more films in this vein, hopefully in the future, that kind of go back and focus on the basics. Number 3 is Insidious. I mean, it takes these really classic ideas but puts them into great scares with great performances and creates a really cool world. I'll always think about Insidious as probably one of the scary movies I've seen in recent years. Number 2 is the only found footage movie on my list. That's Troll Hunter. Really amazing effects, serious, memorable characters, and just really, it's my favorite found footage movie of all time, even more than the Blair Witch Project. And it has some good fun moments in there with the scares. So, very, very original movie.
Justin?
All right. Just for the sake of explaining potential continuity here, with these lists, I've been trying to stay remotely in the genre soul specifically, if that makes sense. So, Cabin in the Woods. Fantastic movie, but it is a horror comedy, so I didn't think it would be appropriate for this list.
Okay.
But for the sake of keeping it interesting, I'll leave that as honorable mention. Number 5, The Wolfman. This is probably what I wanted Dracula Untold to have been. Really good cast: Benicio del Toro, Anthony Hopkins, Emily Blunt. Bring to life one of my favorite monster movies growing up, and really managing to do justice to it. And I seriously wish it had received more attention.
Well, Justin, I'm surprised. You're the one person I've ever heard that actually liked that movie.
I enjoyed it, yeah.
I might have to watch it now. It's one of the few Emily Blunt movies I've never seen.
Well, I didn't like it too much.
I don't think I'll like it at all. It sounds not like my cup of tea, but I'll watch it.
It'll be
And
interesting.
bare minimum, it's well acted, so...
It's well acted. It's just, I thought it was kind of boring. But, hey, if you liked it, good for you, man.
I thought it was very respectful to the original source material. Admittedly, I watched it like a week or two beforehand, but getting off topic. Number 4, The Conjuring. I think James Wan's easily a directorial force to be reckoned with, and this is living proof. Great atmospheric ghost story that takes its time and lets the viewer get drawn into the action. And hopefully the sequel doesn't completely destroy the mythology. Number 3, I think, might be one of the most underrated reboots/reimaginings, and that is The Crazies. Just out of curiosity, either of you have seen it?
I didn't like it.
I heard about it.
I think I gave it like a C-.
Honestly, for a remake of a Romero story that didn't get seen a whole lot and is really seldom spoken about, I thought it was pretty good. And as Joe and I like to call it, perditioned.
Okay.
For anyone who doesn't know the terminology, Bird's Perdition came out, made a lot of noise, and then no one ever talked about it again.
No.
Yeah, that's the joke.
A couple moments that I think are absolutely terrifying. I will never look at pitchforks the same way ever again.
Ooh.
But unfortunately, Four Ways into kind of sort of dark humor is a bit of a mixed bag. My number 2 is Sinister. Probably the closest thing this generation will ever have to an original horror icon, Mr. Boogie. Not so much scary as it is creepy, at least for me anyways, but boy does it stick with you. And still an incredibly original addition to the horror genre when it seemed all but used up.
No, it's a great movie. And specifically, a good addition to the found footage genre because it's literally found footage.
Indeed.
I mean, that's the best part about it. Well, my number 1 is Insidious. This movie is just brilliantly executed, great characters, a great villain, and just a lot of scares around every turn. And you're absolutely right, Joe. It's one that will stick with you, long after seeing it. Insidious 2, I was a little bit mixed on, but I'm definitely interested to see where they take the story with the third one.
I thought the second was kind of bad, to be honest with you.
I was okay with it.
I thought it was bad as a standalone movie.
Mm-hmm.
I think as a companion piece of the first one, it's a little bit better.
I remember that.
If I just watched Insidious 2, I don't think I would have liked it.
Yeah, it's definitely a much weaker standalone film.
Yeah.
I think it was like A to C plus for me or something.
Yeah.
Like it was
Yeah.
a pretty big drop.
Yeah, Insidious is definitely an A for me, the first one. Joe, what's your number one?
My number one, what do you think it is, Dan?
Sinister.
Yes. My number one is Sinister. I mean, this is just a really disturbing and original concept and creates a really great chilling atmosphere. It has probably one of the most unsettling endings ever, and it's a really good Ethan Hawke performance. Definitely the best horror movie I've seen in the last 5 years.
Nice.
And my number one, which showed up on our top 5 serial killer performances, goes to I Saw the Devil. Can a horror movie be a 2-hour plus epic with much deeper themes? Oh yeah. Poses a chilling question of what exactly is evil, and is there a little bit of it in all of us? And it's a horror film in which the quote-unquote protagonist is every bit as morbid and ominous, if not even more so, than the villain.
Interesting. Joe, have you seen this? I Saw the Devil?
I did, but you know what? I totally forgot about it.
But you liked it.
Yeah, that's a really good movie. I definitely, not exactly like the most mainstream version of horror, but definitely
Definitely a horror movie.
Definitely horrific. So yeah, good pick, Justin. Good pick.
Thank you.
All right. Well, just I guess 1 or 2 more weeks of the top 5s, looking back at the past few years, and then we'll get back into some of our more regular top 5s. And of course, towards the end of the year, we'll also have our top 5 most anticipated for 2015. But next up, we have our triple feature of older films, and we start that with new classic This Is 40. Joe's going to talk about it.
Waiting for that sequel. This is 41.
This is 42, Chadwick Boseman.
Ah.
I'd watch it.
All right. This is 40 is a 2012 comedy film written, co-produced, and directed by Judd Apatow. It is a standalone sequel to the 2007 film Knocked Up and stars Paul Rudd and Leslie Mann. The film follows the lives of the middle-aged married couple, Pete, played by Rudd, and Debbie, played by Mann, as they each turn 40, forcing them to deal with the issues of this landmark, with their jobs and daughters adding extra stress into the relationship. They also have to deal with their troubled relations with each of their fathers. This story tackles some rather down-to-earth issues about family, romance, and middle age that seems mostly relevant. It also helps with some of the most memorable side characters for one of Apatow's best movies, having their own film. What works best, though, is the chemistry of the two leads, which seems like a natural romance. It also manages to balance many laughs with some good dramatic components as well. The only real issue with this is the narrative is that it does touch on some areas that aren't quite as explored as they could have been, or wrapped up a little too nicely by the end. Overall, it's an enjoyable ride, and I could see us revisiting these characters in the future, and I leave it with a B+.
Joe, I know you've mentioned that Knocked Up is one of your favorite Apatow films.
Second favorite.
Your number 2. I'm the same way. It's one of my favorites. I would probably say number 2 after 40-Year-Old Virgin. It might even be my number 1. I love Knocked Up, actually. But I love the idea of revisiting these side characters, which so frequently does not work. And here, it's just great. Mann and Rudd do behave like a couple in their 20th or whatever year of marriage. And, of course, the family dynamic as a whole is well intact here, since it's Apatow's entire family. These are his real kids. Just replace Apatow with Rudd, and you've got the whole family. It's funny and real because of that. The only real downfall, as with most Apatow films, is that it runs about 20 minutes too long. And the best way to remedy that would have been to get rid of Jason Segel's character completely. I like Jason Segel, but first off, he was already in Knocked Up as a different character, so it's a little confusing there. And secondly, he just adds nothing. The battle for Megan Fox at the end between him and the delightful Chris O'Dowd just doesn't really need to exist. So you get rid of Segel, you lose that component as well, which is fine. I would have liked to spend more time with Mann and Rudd's parents. Joe, you mentioned that there's a few issues they could have dealt a little bit longer with. I think that's an area.
That and the relationship with the daughters, I felt like the kids could have been explored a little more. They were just kind of there.
Yeah.
They had their little arc, but it's barely there.
Yeah, I would have loved to see more with them. Who knows? That may be... I mean, they're not really actors, so it may be that they didn't want to be in it that much.
I don't know.
I don't know.
From what I saw, I thought they did a good job.
I thought they did a great job. I think they're cute together. and they really do have that whole family dynamic. I think it's a very solid comedy. Lots of really relatable stuff. I give it a B+ as well. Justin?
The 40-Year-Old Virgin, as well as Knocked Up, were two of my favorite comedies from the 2000s. But why director Judd Apatow felt the need to make all of his films after that unnecessarily long is forever lost on me. Such is the case with This Is 40, the Knocked Up spin-off that mostly hides in the shadow of its predecessor. Make no mistake, Rudd and Mann who I think is one of the funniest actresses in the business, are very good together and get plenty of funny moments. But at 2 hours and 14 minutes, the whole narrative gets repetitive. Rudd and Mann are happy. No, they're not. They try or attempt to try to solve the problem, and we're back to square one. For the most part, excluding Albert Brooks' annoying role as Rudd's father who doesn't improve as the film goes on, the first time round it's pretty funny. It's the other two that get tiresome and make an already long movie feel even longer. This Is 40 is a decent spin-off from a far more entertaining comedy that, had they trimmed off 20 to 30 minutes of material, could have been significantly better, and I give it a B-.
You know, Justin, I love Knocked Up, but I do think that is also too long. I think the too long Judd Apatow movies started long before this, and his other movies. Knocked Up, I think you could have trimmed off 10 to 15 minutes and it would have been fine.
40?
40-Year-Old Virgin's perfect. I mean, it's one of the best comedies of our lives. Let's be real.
Yeah.
But Knocked Up, as much as I love it, is also a little bit long.
Yeah, I'll give you that. I mean, 40-Year-Old Virgin I thought did run on a little too long too, but that's just me being nitpicky. I just wish there was something he had a better control of, because a lot of people really do think he's really funny. It's just he makes all of his movies unnecessarily too long.
Yeah, but I think the same thing about Steven Spielberg. Doesn't mean all of his movies are necessarily bad, but, you know, he could use an editor.
But he edits most of his own movies, so that might be why. I'm not going to take anything
exactly.
out. How long can I make this?
I can't harm my baby. But I think that there's a lot of good side characters in this movie and a lot of unimpressive. Yeah, some superfluous ones. I think Albert Brooks is great. I don't mind his character here. You're not wrong, Justin. He doesn't really grow at all. But, I mean, this whole movie's only over the span of about a week.
That's true.
So, yeah. I mean, I can't really expect the world to change, you know, in that amount of time.
I guess my biggest issue is they just don't really manage to do that much with him. It's just the same old, tired, oh, I'm mooching you for money. It's kind of entertaining in a, like, self-loathing, oh, I can relate to this, but then it just gets so overdone.
Well, I don't know. I think that you kind of pointed out you thought that the plot got a little repetitive. I think that was kind of trying to actually demonstrate how marriage can be. You have your ups and downs. I thought that was...
You do have your ups and downs, but you can have ways to play that off in a way that doesn't come off as, oh, we're just repeating the same cycle over and over and over again.
I don't know. I mean, Albert Brooks' character, for instance, I mean, yeah, he said he was repetitive, but he was very stuck in his ways. He's got to keep doing the same thing. That's the problem.
But the problem is he doesn't really feel like a character. He just feels like a farcical sketch.
I don't know.
Oh, I think he definitely feels like a character. He's desperate to get out of a situation that he cannot get out of because now he has children involved.
He's a comedic
young
foil.
Children.
I don't know. I think comedic foil is a little extreme.
I think he's a one-note character.
I'm not denying that.
Mooch.
I'm not denying that, but I'm saying that he's a real character. You're saying that he's not a real character. He's just a farcical sketch. I think he's a real character.
He's a side character. Really, he's a plot point.
He's a plot point, but he doesn't go anywhere. He doesn't really add to the story. I mean, I feel like if they had just like mentioned him,
I don't know about
the movie
that.
would not miss him.
Actually, I think that I think he actually added a little bit to the story like, towards the end when he meets John Lithgow. I think he points out some pretty major things, and I think
he gets one moment, and even then, it's like, and you're any better, really?
Well, he's not.
You're a mooching jerk.
That's what
the point
was. That's how that scene kind of ended.
Yeah, it showed kind of the counteracting between the two fathers, and they kind of failed in their own respective ways. I mean, John Lithgow's character goes through a change, but I thought it was kind of forced, as I said.
I think his change was arbitrary.
You know, whereas, you know, it's like, okay. I mean, it's good it was there. I guess I'm happy with it, but, like, I could have lived with him just, like, kind of being there. Mm-hmm. Like, they have a scene where he's still at the party, and I thought that was nice. Like, there's a beginning. Whereas, oh, happy ending, we're all great, and I'm just, I don't know.
Yeah.
A little much. Like, with Brooks, I felt like he didn't necessarily have to change, at least not that quickly.
I'm not saying he had to change. I'm just saying I feel like he shouldn't be a one-note character. If he's going to do something, make him actually go somewhere. I'm not saying change. I'm just saying give him something to do other than the same three things for the course of a nearly 2 hour and 20-minute movie.
I think in the hospital scene at the end, he does sort of
that's a good
reach a little bit of a
I agree.
realization.
Which would have been great
say.
if they had not taken that and completely devolved into the same one note.
They give you
Apatow likes to end on a joke. What can I say?
Yeah.
But I mean, you can't tell me that his character was more unnecessary in the film than Jason Segel's.
No,
You know?
that's indefensible.
Okay. Fair enough. And always good to see Chris O'Dowd, of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
Megan Fox, Joe?
She was fine.
Yeah, thought she was good.
She's good doing the one thing she does well.
I think they kept her maybe one scene too long. I don't think she needed to be at the
pool
party. But
that whole scene
if Jason Segel wasn't there, she wouldn't have been.
Yeah, that whole scene was kind of unnecessary now looking back on it.
Yeah.
But no, actually, I liked Megan Fox's movie. I can like her. I just think she has to have very specific roles.
All right, well, up next is my pick for old classic. Originally, I was going to run the 80s version of Annie with Carol Burnett, because, of course, we're going to be reviewing the new Annie in a couple weeks. But then I thought, you know what, we haven't done any Christmas movies yet, and there are no big Christmas releases theatrically this year. So I thought, let's run one of my favorites, and that is The Ref. This is a 1994 Christmas comedy that served as explicit MTV comic Dennis Leary's bid to become a leading man. It was directed by Ted Demme and produced by powerhouse team Don Simpson and Jerry Bruckheimer. Leary plays Gus, a cat burglar who trips the alarm at the house he's trying to hit, so his lookout ride gets scared and splits, leaving Gus to make other arrangements. He stumbles upon Caroline and Lloyd, played by Judy Davis and Kevin Spacey, fresh from their marriage counseling appointment, and forces them at gunpoint to take him to their house until he can figure out his next move. Unfortunately, it's Christmas Eve, so family guests are coming, including Lloyd's domineering mother, played by Mary Poppins' Glynis Johns, and Caroline and Lloyd's son, who's been away at military school blackmailing his commanding officer, played by the great J.K. Simmons. The Ref has been a favorite holiday comedy of mine since high school, and one I'll pull out and watch every few years. It has a razor-sharp wit, which dovetailed nicely with the persona Leary had created for himself in his stand-up routines and MTV promos. Spacey and Davis are pitch perfect here as well as the frightened couple, but never too frightened to get a good jab in at the other. The Christmas dinner scene where Leary has to pose as their marriage counselor so the rest of the family doesn't suspect anything, which turns into a verbal slugfest, is a particular highlight. Viewers who aren't fans of Leary's comedy probably won't get too much out of The Ref. And, you know, I was afraid maybe I had just had a displaced nostalgia for the film. But this week in my research, I learned that AFI had it on their shortlist for the 100 greatest comedies of all time list. So obviously it's not just me. I give The Ref a B+. Justin?
I have some fairly noticeable gaps when it comes to Christmas movies. So when Dan made his final OCT...
And comedies. Sorry.
Lest we forget, and comedies. So when Dan made his final OCT of the year, The Ref, I was relatively intrigued. It's a ridiculously over-the-top premise, but like many classic Christmas movies, it's all the more fun for it. Although Spacey and Davis have virtually no chemistry together, Leary plays off their bickering like a pro, easily getting some of the film's best lines to allow the third act to really get the big laughs. Aside from the fact that there may be a bit too much going on in terms of subplots, and Leary's unnecessary swearing gets a little tiresome, The Ref is truly an underrated Christmas comedy, and I give it a B.
All right. Joe, what did you think of The Ref?
I thought it was pretty great situational comedy. I mean, it's a really awesome premise, but I do agree that the one subplot, I think, with his getaway guy, I thought was pretty weak.
Yeah.
But other than that, I really liked it. I think Spacey and Davis had pretty good chemistry. I mean, they were both really angry, but like I said, I thought it was kind of almost the pre-American Beauty. Like you put Annette Bening there, it's very similar. But I thought they were really great together. I thought that the humor was really good. It was very witty in terms of the writing. Dan, I think that was really good there. Spacey's showcase, his fairly early performance for him was good. But I do agree with you that I think it's very selective. Like if you don't like Dennis Leary, you would probably get really tired of it. But I love Dennis Leary. I've always been a fan of him. I think he's really funny. And I think that he just kind of lights up every scene. Just his reactions to everything are great. And it really is a good counterbalance to Spacey's comedy and just a lot of the writing that goes along. So I also think that, for a Christmas film, it does have a good message, actually, despite everything that's going on. And I did like the resolution for most of the characters. Simmons actually played a character so different than anything I've ever seen him in.
Yeah,
Just
pretty unrecognizable, really.
Very low key. He even speaks very differently. That guy really needs to get more love. He has a lot more range. But really good movie. I actually am there with you, Dan. I give it a B+. It was very enjoyable.
Yeah, it's a little bit syrupy sweet at the end, as all Christmas movies are.
Yeah.
But then it also isn't too. You know.
I don't know. In a way.
In certain respects, Justin, I'm not sure if the lack of chemistry that you felt is more of a situational kind of... I mean, they're not supposed to have good chemistry. Their marriage is completely falling apart on the rocks. I thought as actor and actress, they had great chemistry.
In terms of getting a good jab at each other, like you mentioned, yes. In terms of trying to play this married couple who gets back together, it's not quite.
So you didn't buy them at the end, is what you're saying?
No, not particularly.
Okay.
I mean, obviously, it's no real big surprise. Oh, that it's going to start off with them. It's called The Ref. Guess what the role of Dennis Leary is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
To get them together.
Yeah.
Right. But, I mean, that's really the last 2 minutes of the movie. I mean...
It is, which I think the title's a little misleading, but...
Well, I'll admit it's not a great title, but, we've had issues with the other films in that regard, so I can't really...
Just a little bit.
It is kind of an odd title.
In some foreign countries, it was called...
Getting Together.
Holiday Hostages or something.
That's not much better, but...
Well, but that's what they were.
Well, I mean, I don't know. The Ref isn't really misleading. It's...
Yeah.
I mean, if you didn't really know...
He's definitely the go-between.
Yeah, he gets them together. He's got to solve the marriage, Mm-hmm. I thought it worked pretty well for the most part. I mean, I guess maybe you're not supposed to buy it, but it's a Christmas movie at the end of the day. It's like...
Yeah, which is where I was generally going with it.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of why I don't give it, like, an A-. I mean, comedy-wise, I think it's right there. But, yeah, I mean, this sort of sappy ending... but it's a Christmas movie, so it's like...
Let it go, kind of.
Yeah, you gotta kind of let it go. I mean, you're not gonna find too many Christmas movies that
end with divorce and hatred.
Divorce,
kind of
the
most morbid Christmas ending of all time.
The kid keeps blackmailing J.K. Simmons.
Black Christmas?
Oh, wait, I stand corrected.
Yeah, there's a few, I'm just saying. Typically, not so much. But yeah, I mean, this movie really was made for lack of a better term, the MTV generation. I mean, the only people who knew who Dennis Leary was when this came out were probably the under 25 set. It didn't do very well at the box office, which is why he sort of segued into TV roles rather than more feature films. But, I mean, he'll show up here and there. Classic draft day.
Spider-Man.
Spider-Man, that's true. The Amazing Spider-Man. 2 of Justin's all-time faves.
Yeah, no, right?
Yeah.
He knows how to pick them. Hey,
right.
There is one of my favorites, though, Suicide Kings.
Yeah, that's true. So he's in Suicide Kings.
So he gets some good roles here and there.
Yeah, none starring, though. This was one of his only starring feature films.
It's actually the only one I can think of offhand.
Yeah. I think he was the romantic lead in something with Janine Garofalo.
Oh, my.
The Matchmaker, I want to say. Anyway, I think I watched it once.
Sounds like something up there.
Ladies and gentlemen,
big Janine Garofalo fan.
Dennis Leary's film career. Something with Gene Garofalo. Man.
It may have been called The Matchmaker, and he might have played the lead.
Back in 97 or something.
I think it was, like 97, 98.
Would be.
But, I've always really liked Dennis Leary. But if you don't like him, if you can't... It is a little much with the expletives. I'll give you that, Justin. All right, well, our final film is Another Year, and this is in our Oscar A to Z list here, and it was nominated for Original Screenplay back in 2010. Justin's going to tell us about it.
Tom and Jerry Heppel, played by Jim Broadbent and Ruth Sheen, have been happily married for years until the start of autumn, in which they are surrounded by friends and family who are significantly less so. Another Year explores this matter over the course of, you may have guessed, a year, through various visitations such as Mary, played by Leslie Manville, a divorcee struggling to find a new relationship, and the Heppel's own son, Joe, played by Oliver Maltman, whose new girlfriend creates a divide between Jerry and Mary. There's probably never going to be a more frustrating film that I will talk about in the show than Another Year, if only for the sole reason that I should not have as many issues with it as I do. It's a slice-of-life film. Insert Richard Linklater joke here. It has a great cast, which I'd like to think most people love. and it has some seriously promising storylines. Since we watched this, I've spent days trying to figure out why I'm so frustrated with this movie, and I think the biggest problem is this. It has no direction. And when it does, it has varying degrees of it. The story is told in segmented seasons, but the characters dramatically vary from season to season with little rhyme or reason. Character development is one thing, but dramatic motivation changes are for no reason is another. We joked a little bit near the end that the film felt like 4 entirely different directors were each given a season to direct without any communications between them, and this was the end result. All 4 have their moments, but these are so sporadic that the film never seems to gain or lose momentum for the audience. In the end, Another Year is not an awful film, nor is it a great one. It just is a movie wandering around aimlessly, and I give it a C-.
Joe, what'd you think of Another Year?
You know, I actually looked this one up, and apparently people loved it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know it was. I find it interesting. It was nominated for a great screenplay, and I think that thematically speaking, I think I know what it was going for. But I'll be honest, I don't even really know if I know what this movie's about, like what it's trying to do. I think you said it best, Justin. It has no real direction. Really, it just seems like a bunch of interconnected storylines about.
With little connection, actually.
Barely connected storylines with people who seem to almost forget the previous storyline entirely. Literally, thinking back on it now, I think that the most interesting part of the story was the first 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And literally, that storyline, which is the best, is completely dropped, never spoken of again. Doesn't even seem to be really related at all to the actual film. So, I mean, barely perhaps by themes and interactions with a few characters, but really, ultimately, completely pointless. But it's probably the main reason I'm not going to fail the movie, because it actually was really good. Yes, there were some good performances. There was some decent cinematography in there somewhere, I guess.
Editing.
Yeah.
Editing good stuff, with the seasons was clever. There wasn't really anything that really spoke to me in this movie. It didn't really draw me in. I found it incredibly boring and frustrating and repetitive, but mostly because Broadbent was, holding it up when he could, and I liked thematically what they were kind of trying to do. I give it a D. Honestly, thinking back on it, I would rather watch The Accidental Tourist, because at least I felt the congruent storyline there.
It's another movie where someone died and we didn't know who it was for like 10 minutes.
Actually, several times.
Yeah.
I was confused. Yes, that's a good point.
I feel like this movie is why the Academy needs a bigger, more diverse voting bloc than just older white men. Which it's largely made up of. I just can't imagine anybody under 50 liking this movie. The characters are boring, the movie is dull, and it's really not even that well written. You guys said it, so rather than rehash what's already been said, I will list just some of the films in 2010 that could have been nominated instead for Best Original Screenplay. Black Swan, Blue Valentine, Buried,
Definitely.
Cyrus, Easy A, How to Train Your Dragon. That's just the first half of the alphabet.
Wow, they actually have stories and motivations. That makes sense.
Any of these would have been... I can't believe Black Swan wasn't nominated for everything it got nominated for.
That surprises me, actually.
But, this movie is not good. I give it a D as well. It's frustrating to me that many people watching this movie thought, oh, well, this is a much better script than Blue Valentine. Or any of those other movies. It blows my mind.
Maybe it's just something that the audience could relate to, because if it is about a bunch of older white men,
yes,
and it's about getting old and retiring, I mean, admittedly, that's what the movie's about, I guess, but it doesn't really have any really fleshed out characters or thought out ideas or really well structured of a plot. I mean, it's horrible.
But, and there's a lot of movies with that senior citizen leaning plot, like, let's say, Amour, that are riveting and have a lot going on, and you can not be bored with it.
Absolutely.
And so it's frustrating that with so many good scripts every year, something like this gets nominated largely because of who makes up the Academy.
It's really interesting, because I remember in the midst of trying to be like, why do people like this movie? Is there something I'm missing? And I remember going to an IMDb forum, which I usually like to do just because I like to hear outside opinions. There was a post called "For Those Who Don't Like It," And the poster's argument was simply, well, it's a movie about people who are lost. There are movies all over the place about people who are lost.
Yeah.
They're really, really good. This movie does not define anything. It just is about these really somber characters that goes nowhere.
Right.
Good example. The Rocket. Figuratively and literally,
that
a
is
bunch
true.
of characters that are lost. And you know what? Much less dialogue in that movie.
Fascinating.
A lot of subtext, which is this movie's trying to do, but it's interwoven well. It's all connected directly. They address every plot point. This movie barely has any plot points.
I know.
It's just random scenes with people being morose.
Like, the only takeaway I have from it is that one woman that, like, wanted to get with the young guy,
I thought
who cares?
I thought that was... This is how badly established the characters are. For about 3/4 of the movie, 3 seasons, I thought she was over so much because they were sisters. But because they never addressed anything. But then we find, she's just a friend that they feel bad for. And then when she comes to address something when they're in a moment of grief, they just turn her away because they're annoyed with her. I'm like, well, you're great people.
Well, so you were horrified by that part because you thought she wanted to have sex with her nephew half the movie.
That's why I was like, why are they joking about this? And then, it made sense. But I mean, like, I think my problems are completely understandable.
They're justified.
I was confused
because
they never. We had subtitles on. Never mentioned it once. Even hinted.
The most interesting part to me about the entire film was what's Broadbent going to bring out of the car. Like,
unfortunately.
There were about 4 scenes of him taking things from cars and taking them inside. That was about it.
Well, it shows his routine. See, that's actually the most interconnected trope in the movie.
I was going to say I'll give that one at least points for trying to create a rhythm.
Yeah, there's a rhythm, all right. A rhythm
it's not that engaging in the slightest.
Into the wall, man.
Boring can be a rhythm, right?
To sleep. Maybe like a gentle rhythm to...
it's like a white noise machine
to
in this movie.
Down. Oh, man.
All right, well, another terrible one in the books. As the Oscar slot so frequently is. It's sort of that pendulum swinging back and forth. We do have a nice run coming up, though. I know that. Some of them I've seen, some of them I just know are great from other people.
Drop any hints for the listeners? I'm curious now.
We're up to the movies that start with AP. So you've got Apollo 13 somewhere in there. Mm-hmm. You've got Apocalypse Now somewhere in there. Yeah. So there's a few good ones coming up.
Okay.
All right. Well, that is going to do it for this week's show. Next week, we'll, of course, return to our regular format. We're going to review movies like The Pyramid and Exodus, Gods and Kings. Joe, what's new on the Merlin channel?
Oh, just doing my thing. I actually did a couple reactions to recent trailers. I did the one for the Star Wars and Jurassic World. Right. Also did one for the Terminator movie. And I really want you to watch the one because it's very entertaining. Cool. I actually recorded myself watching the trailer. So
nice.
It should be fun. And I also did a little video celebrating the next Dragon Ball Z movie. Frieza's returning. So it's going to be a 2-hour runtime, which is unprecedented. And really looking forward to that. So, yeah, a lot of good things happening. And I'm getting pretty close to 1,000 subscribers. So,
yeah, boy, you really are.
So I'll have to be doing some special videos for that.
Awesome. Well, we just hit the 50 subscriber mark on our channel, so we want to thank everybody that's already come aboard. And if you're listening and have not subscribed yet, go ahead and do that. And if you know somebody that you think would be interested in the show, pass the link along and get them into Film Fanatics. You can also join us on the Facebook group, Film Fanatics with an exclamation point, and the Twitter is @FilmFanaticsPod. And thanks so much for listening. We'll see you back here next week. Bye!